So today we had Nikki. She is a love and relationship alchemist. So this is a really good conversation. We got in, I guess, spoke about a bit about self-love and how to attract you know, the person that you want to be with, and also how to create, I guess, create a legacy and successful relationship at the same time. So this is a lot of powerful things in this podcast. I will also link all our socials and all our other stuff in the bio below. And other than that, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast and get straight into it.
Sweet. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I am really, really well. I am having a day of epic conversations and it's just making me froth on life. It's so good.
Yeah, it helps to like higher vibration up and you're like, yes, makes you
Yeah.
even more pumped. I felt like that yesterday after
Yeah,
I did
awesome.
a workshop, and I was like, it was a bit late at night for me to be that pumped, but yeah.
I did that last night. I ran one of my master classes and I got off and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to sleep right now. So I don't think I crawled into bed till about 11 o'clock. And of course, because I'd gone to bed so late, my little man decided to wake 3 times through the night. My other boys woke up at least one time, and then one of them came and climbed into bed with me, and it was just like, oh, there is no sleep happening tonight.
Yeah, that's understandable. So I guess before we jump in, I'll get you to explain, I guess, what you're about, what you do, and I guess a little bit about your story.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. So for those of you listening, my name is Nikii Syme. I'm a love and relationship alchemist, and I support women in really unleashing their hearts so they can let the kind of love that they really desire and deserve into their lives. And then I also work with couples to really support them in thriving in their relationships. Freaking love what I do. Freaking love what I do, and I'm also really passionate about birth and motherhood and supporting women in that. So that's something that I'm going to be diving into more in 2021, I feel. And what kind of got me into doing this work of particularly the relationship stuff and supporting women to attract their partners was my own personal journey to not finding love, but calling in my king. And yeah, the struggles that I really went through with that, and predominantly with the relationship with myself and what I was kind of allowing into my life. And then also like my sabotage patterns of when something amazing did come into my life and I wasn't able to hold it because of the relationship I had with myself. So I went on a really huge journey of just really connecting back into me, coming home to myself, really building that beautiful relationship as the foundation, like with myself as a foundation for a relationship with someone else to thrive on. And because of that work, I was able to attract in my now king and baby daddy, and 5 years down the track, still really in a beautiful, happy relationship with him that just continues to grow in love and lust and excitement and passion every day. So yeah, pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's like great to hear that because I think a lot of the time we get into relationships and they get real stagnant after that honeymoon period. And then I guess there's a few like that's when all the twists and turns happen. And then, we stop growing. For example, we just
Yeah.
compromise so much.
I
And I
feel like
love,
that's the collective story though, right? It's like,
yes.
oh, once the honeymoon period's over, then it just becomes boring and mundane and you just kind of go into this groundhog day and it's, on repeat. And I'm like, well, actually it doesn't have to be that way, right? And that's what I kind of work with my clients about, is really supporting them to shift that story and going, just because that's what society tells you it should be doesn't mean that you actually have to subscribe to it. You get to actually create your relationship by design based on what feels good for the two of you. Yeah, it's not this cookie cutter white picket fence, 2.5 kids in the burbs. It's not that for everyone. And maybe your relationship does look like an open relationship. Maybe your relationship looks like not getting married. Maybe it looks like getting married. Maybe it looks like traveling the world together and living out of a suitcase. As long as it feels good for you too, that's all that matters, and you get to create it how you want it.
That's 100% right. So I guess with your clients, what would you like some of the pillars you would use to help to guess continue to create that sparkling relationship like further down the track or after the honeymoon stage?
I think, for me, and looking at my own relationship, and, when you even throw kids into the mix as well, it just takes it on to a whole new level. And, there's been moments in my relationship where we have kind of slipped into that boring, stagnant, Groundhog Day, and mainly because of the children. Like, you're going to get into this habit, they get up, they get fed, they go to school, like you go to work and they come home and you do the night routine, and then by the end of the day you're on the couch and you're just like, I'm wrecked and don't have any energy for each other. So we've had multiple conversations around this, and constantly, being in that space of, okay, how does this feel? Does it feel good? If not, how do we shift it? What needs to change? What needs to get, looked at? So that we can continue to evolve and thrive. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things, is understanding that, you get into a relationship, but just because you're in a relationship doesn't mean that your growth stops. You are an ever evolving human being, as your partner is. So not only are you evolving as an individual, your relationship is going to evolve as well. And as long as you can actually remain open and expansive with that and go, okay, cool, I'm not fixed to a certain idea of how it has to look. I'm open to it looking however it needs to look, and its natural progression, and leaning into that constantly, and being willing to have the uncomfortable conversations. Like, we had one recently around being sexy. And, it was confronting for me, because this is something, as a mother now, I was really struggling with, oh, am I sexy and not feeling it? And he said to me, he was like, you're not sexy. I find you sexy, but you don't find you sexy, and that makes you unsexy. And to hear that from your partner, you're like, oh, far out, man. That, like,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's like, oh, thank you for seeing me and loving me enough to have that conversation with me, and to tell me the stuff that I actually need to hear. So I think, that open conversation is so important. That open communication is really, really important. And just being in the surrender and trust of, your relationship will evolve as it does, as it's meant to. And it's up to you how you respond to that and how you progress with that, and just being willing to have those conversations when they come up.
I think that's like the most important bit of, I guess, any relationship is, communication, being able to communicate, have those tough talks. And I love that how you brought up, like, I guess, like, relationships are generally about just as what is important with them is growth. Cause like, that's like one of my core values. And that's kind of, I guess, the reason why I've shied away from them for, I guess, 2+ years, or haven't even bothered thinking about it, is because it's like, okay, if I get into one, am I going to stagnate my growth? Because at the moment I'm on a pretty good, uphill growth,
Yeah.
I guess, road.
That's choice, right? Like,
Yes.
you have a choice to get into a relationship and stunt your growth, or get into a relationship and continue to grow. And even more so, because I believe from my own personal experience and what I see in others, is that we can do the work when we're single and when we're alone and get to a certain point, but it's not until you really get into a relationship that, like, the real work begins, because you've got that person there who is mirroring back to you and reflecting back to you all the shit that you've been avoiding while you've been single, and there's no escaping it. Like, relationships are the biggest personal development experience of your life. And then kids take it to a whole new level, because all your shit gets triggered when you have children. Like, all of it is
Yeah.
next level.
Yeah, I can definitely see that too. And it's a lot of stuff that I've come across too, because it's like they are generally just a reflection of us. And then it's also
Yeah.
like when we get into relationships too, because I guess one thing I like to talk about, a lot of the things that we don't like in other people is the stuff that we generally don't like in ourselves. And I guess relationships show that the most, because it's such a
Definitely.
reflection.
Yeah. And you can't escape it. If you're in a conscious relationship, you cannot escape it. You've constantly got that person. You're constantly in that space of, okay, how am I showing up here? What am I responsible for here? What do I get to own here? How do I get to express this? How do I now get to express and communicate my feelings and my needs? And it's this constant unraveling and piecing together, and unraveling and piecing together. It sounds full on, and it can be, but it's amazing at the same time, right? Because it's like, well, for me as well, one of my highest values is growth, personal development, continuing to move forward and expand into the highest version of myself. And I desire to be in a relationship that's going to support me in that, and that's what I choose. If I was in a relationship where the other person wasn't open to that in any way, shape, or form, then it wouldn't last. Yeah, and that's why I say it's about a choice. Like, you choose who you get to be with, and if you want to be with someone who's going to support you in your growth and grow with you, then that's what you get to ask for and receive.
And that's why it always comes back down to communication. And I guess like I guess also us too. It's like, how would what stage of the relationship where, or like especially at the beginning stages, when do you start looking at, I guess, communicating your values and seeing if they do align and so forth?
Right at the beginning.
Right at the beginning.
Right at the beginning. Yeah, 100%. Why would you want to waste your time? Why would you want to get 6 months down the track and then have the conversation and realize that this person is completely misaligned? So many people are really afraid to actually have those conversations at the beginning because they don't want to scare someone off. But it's like, well, wouldn't you rather scare off the wrong person at the beginning than 6 months down the track where you've wasted all that time to find out that they're not the right one for you? Have the conversations. Don't be afraid, because you cannot say the wrong thing to the right person. Open up the conversation, and if they run, perfect. Stop being afraid of that, because that is actually the universe or life working out for you. It's not rejection, it's redirection. If someone's not aligned with your values, awesome, bye, good luck, see you next. I wish you all the best, next please. Send me my person. But the only way you can know that is by having the conversation. And not being afraid, to be alone. I think that's the other thing, is that a lot of people are really afraid of being alone, so they avoid having the conversations because they really want to be with someone, and then it just ends in shit.
100%
So
agree.
often.
100% agree with that too, because it's like we get so attached to the idea of being, I guess, successful, and that we can't accept the failures. So every time we'll try everything we can, this is like life general, to not fail, even though failure is probably the greatest opportunity for growth and to show you what path to actually take. And it's, as you're saying, it's perfect in a relationship too, especially at the start, instead of wasting time further on.
Yeah, 100%. Like, my time is my most valuable asset, right? So I want to, and I do this even with friends, like, I suss them out right at the beginning. I'm like, are you my person? And if they're not, it's like, okay, cool, thanks, acquaintance, see ya. But I'm not afraid to actually ask for what I desire anymore. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle to kind of lean into, is just being like, this is what I want, and being willing to hold it and own it, and not settle, and just be like, this is what I want. This is what I'm calling in, and I will wait for it to come, because I fully trust and know that that is available to me. If I can think it, then I get to receive it.
And that's exactly right. I guess it's also, I guess one of my big questions would be like, because with myself, I have like, I guess, a big purpose or dream. How would you be able to create, I guess, the successful relationship and the successful business? I guess you've done both. So I guess what's some of the pillars or advice would you give around that?
Stay in your own lane. For me, that's probably been the biggest lesson, and the acceptance of my partner. So my partner works a 9 to 5, and he is happy in that. He loves the security. See, I see it as security. But for him, it does mean security. So he knows when he's working, he knows when he's got time off, he knows how much money's coming into his bank account. Like, he likes that certainty. And for a really long time, when we got into the relationship, I was like, but you're here for bigger things, and what's your purpose, and why don't you go and do something else that you love, and really was trying to push my agenda onto him. And of course, all it did was create frustration and what's the word I'm looking for, like, not discontentment, but just the energy between us of dis-ease, because he wasn't feeling accepted. He was feeling like I was trying to change him, and I was getting frustrated because he wasn't doing what I wanted him to do. So it wasn't until I just released and surrendered and went, okay, cool, so that's his journey. Just because we're in a relationship doesn't mean that I have the right to change him or tell him what he needs to do. He's his own person still, and he gets to live his life in a way that feels good for him and that lights him up. and we get to stay in our own lanes on that. You know, I'm really entrepreneur driven. I'm business driven. I love the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows of entrepreneurship, and I love the uncertainty. Like I thrive in that, as well as I freaking hate it. You know, like there's this real polarity with it, and I'm sure you understand. But that's my way, you know, and he supports me in that. But I wasn't supporting him in his way. I was like, well, my way's the best way and you have to do it my way. And it's like, well, actually, no. He gets to support me in what's important to me and creating my, you know, my legacy and my thriving business. And I get to fucking support him in what he's doing and love him and what he's doing as well. So that's why I say really stay on your side of the road, right? Like I think a lot of people get into relationships and they think that they have to be like this all the time. And it's like, no. You're still two individuals, right? You're still two individuals. You think differently, you perceive differently, you experience life completely differently. And you get to continue that and keep that individualism and then create a life together based on the things that you are actually mutually agreeing on, like the values and you know, whether you want to have kids and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you get to be your individual self as well as in this beautiful thriving relationship.
And I think that's very important because it's like we see a lot of the time, especially in normal society, is that we spend so much time trying, like in the couple relationship, that's, you know, one's trying to be like the other, so forth, and
Trying
then
to
they get to
change
the,
the other.
yeah, and that too, and then they get to the end of the relationship, and you end up being so heartbroken because you've lost yourself because you tried to be so much someone else that you weren't, instead of communicating where, I guess, what your values were, but
Oh
instead
yeah,
was
been
so
there.
busy. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely have been. And, you know, you're so busy compromising to them, and then it ends up, you know, in, I guess, a massive heartbreak, I guess.
Yeah, and you just left going, who the hell am I? What was even that? Like, what was I thinking? Why did I let that happen? You know, and then you've got that self-deprecating stuff that comes in. It's like, I'm never gonna let that happen again. I get committed to never letting that. And then you get into another relationship, it happens again, and you're like, fuck, why did that? You know, and then until you actually really wake up and go, okay, we get to do some work here and really build that foundation. You know, that's my core teaching, is that relationship with self is what is going to support you and attracting what it is that you actually really want in a relationship. If that relationship with self is out of whack in any kind of like way, shape, or form, you're either going to attract where you're at, which isn't necessarily what you desire, or you will attract exactly what you want, but you'll sabotage it because you don't know how to actually receive it. So you get to create that and build that relationship with self, to have your boundaries, to have your standards, to have the things in place to create that foundation, so that when the person does come in, you're actually able to receive the kind of love that you say you want. You know, it's so important. You know, people are like, oh, I'm looking for love, and they're constantly searching outside of themselves. And I'm like, stop looking outside of yourself and come back in here. You know, focus on the feeling good, focus on creating the joy, focus on the faith, the trust, the surrender, being with you. Just allow it to come to you in the right time.
That's why I love this quote. It's like you only can receive the amount of love that you have for yourself.
Yeah.
So it's like this thing that we're always constantly searching for love outside of us, but then to realize every time we get into a relationship, the same, quote unquote bad emotions come up that we don't like, or the same, behaviors and all this stuff. And it's because, we don't love ourselves, and we don't realize that that's the most important thing for us to be able to receive.
Yes, absolutely. The relationship with self is the foundation for everything in our lives. Yeah, like, and that's like the key to manifestation and attracting all that we desire is really in the feeling good and the gratitude and the appreciation and the joy and those really high vibrational like energies. They are what are going to support you and anyone listening to this in receiving, if love is what you are calling in, it's that's actually going to have the biggest impact, not what you're wearing or what you're saying. If you're saying the right things to her or him, or the size of your body, anything like that, it's really the energy that you're putting out from inside.
It's 100% right, especially with everything in life. It's what, what you're putting out that's more what comes back in. And this is
Mhm.
something I've learned on my own personal development journey is the more that I've shifted my mindset on things, the more opportunities that have appeared because I'm looking from things at a different angle instead of looking at it
Right.
from, I guess, the bottom.
Yeah, absolutely. Like your whole outlook on life shifts when you're feeling centered and calm and connected and safe within yourself. And even just trusting your body and your intuition and your inner guidance and wisdom, um, as opposed to being stuck in that negative, lack, scarcity, why does nothing work for me? Why does everything happen to me? That kind of mentality, which really just blocks us from receiving what it is that we're here to actually experience.
Mm. And that's why I love the quote by like Peter Crone. I hope I don't butcher it too much. It's like we aren't victims of life; we're beneficiaries of life. So everything that's happening to
Mm,
us is, for is everything's happening for us. Sorry.
yeah, 100%. Even the rejections, even the heartbreaks, even the deaths, it's all for us in some way, shape, or form. Should we choose to believe that and look at it with that kind of lens? Or, the option is be the victim to it and be victim to your entire life and feel like you have zero say in everything that's unfolding. Um, I've been both, and I can tell you now for sure that opting the for me option is yeah, it feels way better.
Definitely does. And it's crazy how much everything shifts in your life too. And you kind of
Mm,
like, when you say a trigger does come up and you kind of realize it's like, okay, there's something to do with me, not what's going on outside. I'm like, and this gives me a new opportunity to create a new level of freedom.
yeah, yeah, right. And it's that internal freedom. Like for me, freedom from my mind, freedom from like the thoughts that used to really bring me down and lower my vibration and make me feel like shit, like that. Oh, when I was able to create the disconnect, like detach from that, that was probably one of the most beautiful moments of my life, to actually finally be at peace with the voices in my head, because I've really struggled with that. I think I had a quarter life crisis at 25 after a friend of mine died from a drug overdose, accidental drug overdose. And it was a real slap in the face of, you know, you've been suffering for too long, Nick, and you weren't here. You're not put here to suffer. You're here to actually enjoy life. And I just remember thinking, there's got to be more. Like, I used to see people that were so happy, and I'm like, how do they get there? Like, how are they so happy? Like, I want that. I want to experience that, but it felt so far removed from where I was. I was like, I don't even know how to get there. And there was so much self-loathing, self-hatred, like just hated my body, didn't like my personality, thought I was boring, like so much negativity towards myself, that led to this massive breakdown and realization that, I'm not guaranteed anything on this planet. My time here is not guaranteed. And I had a choice in that moment to either go, because I literally, like, yes, my beautiful friend died, but I spent weeks on the couch just in breakdown. And I was really lucky that the girlfriend of the guy who actually passed away, she saw what was going on, and she was like, Nick, you need to get some help. And she dragged me off to my first psychologist, Tom. He was amazing. I'll never forget that man. He just changed everything. And it was, yeah, it was like in that moment of going, well, what are you going to choose now, Nick? Like, that there is a different way. You're lying here, you're sobbing, your flatmates want nothing to do with you, like you're pushing everyone away, you're so low. And it was my bottom, it was at that rock bottom. And it was like, okay, well, now what? Die or get the fuck up and choose something different? And I got the fuck up and chose something different. And thank fuck for that, because now, it was that journey of coming back and actually building the relationship with myself that's allowed me to literally create the life that I dream of.
Mm. And that's what
Yeah.
I, yes, firmly believe in every situation, you, especially a big traumatic situation, you do have those two options where you can, you know, you can stay there and play the victim to, life, or you have the opportunity to grow. And
Yeah.
guess with those things, that's where the biggest opportunity is through, I guess, going through something similar as that, heartbreak, and a bunch of other things. It gives you the biggest opportunity to pivot in your life.
Yeah, 100%. And, having people in your life too that are there to, support you to be your higher self. Like, if it wasn't for that beautiful friend, I'm sure eventually I would have got help, but just to have someone who saw me and saw how much pain I was in and that I trusted, who reached out and just said, come with me and just take my hand and let's do something about this. It was just like, oh, thank you. Like, I'm so grateful for that. So grateful for that. It was really beautiful.
And it makes it 10 times easier to do those big pivots too when you have the support network right there with you, holding your hand along the way. Because it's like, as humans, our highest value is connection, because that's, we're social animals.
We're wired for it.
And then you have that opportunity there, especially with someone, take advantage of it. Best way to explain it.
Yeah, definitely. Reach out, and if you can't, if there's someone that's not seeing you and not seeing that you need help, ask for it. Sometimes we do need to take responsibility and ask for what we need as well.
Because that's like one of the biggest things that I did in my life, is started to reach out, started to do my own, research into things, and especially when I was at my low point, because I guess I was kind of reaching out to people, but I wasn't getting back what I felt like I needed at the time. So I'm like, okay, I feel like I need to pivot and do, reach out to, or do my own research. And then I ended up reaching out afterwards.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
So with self-love, when working with your clients, what are the first kind of, I guess, pillars or some of the things you work around with your clients with self-love, or, helping them reach that?
Yeah, cool. So the first thing that I generally tend to get them to look at is values. Values are really important because they kind of set the stage for what we say yes to, what we say no to, and how we feel in our day-to-day life. If we don't know what our values are, we often kind of just coast through life and don't really necessarily feel fulfilled. But when we get really clear on, okay, well, this is important to me, and am I living in alignment with that value? When you start to actually shift and pivot into that, it's like, oh, okay, cool. So this actually feels really good. Like, to be actually really honoring my sacred no and yes, and, prioritizing, say, family is a value, making sure that you're spending time around your family and that you're nourishing that value, as opposed to saying yes to all these things that take you away from that. Honoring the value is going to feel a million times better than not. So that's probably the first thing that we really look at, is getting clear on the top 5 kind of values of their life, and then looking at how aligned they are with those, and then really looking at what's going on in their minds, their belief systems, how they're how they're speaking to themselves, how they're showing up for themselves. They're probably the 2 main kind of areas that we start, and then once we kind of get an idea of what's going on for them and where they're at, we build from there.
Which I think, that is definitely really important, especially values. And a lot of the time, this is an exercise I did probably 6 months ago. I wrote down my values, and then I wrote down to what the values I was playing to in real life, and they did not match up at all. And that was a really big shift. And I slowly but surely shifted those values back into alignment.
Yeah, I didn't even know what values were until I was 25. My psychologist, was like, so what are your values? And I'm like, what's a value? And he's like, oh, what's important to you? And I was like, no fucking idea. No idea. I had no idea. I'd never even thought about it, and a lot of people don't. They just go through life and they know that doing something makes them feel really good, and they know that doing other things doesn't feel quite so good, but they don't quite understand what's going on. And it's not until they actually sit down and go, oh, that feels good because it's actually something that's really important to me. It's like health, or eating really clean, eating well is a huge value of mine. And when I don't, I feel like shit. Yeah. So it's important to me that I nourish my body. I allow myself to have moderation of chocolates and junk, but 90% of the time I choose to honor the value of, nutrition and nourishing my body in a way that makes me feel light and energized, you know. And when I do that, I feel amazing. When I don't, I feel like shit, you know, like, and I want to feel amazing. Like, that's what I want to feel. That's what I'm choosing to feel. So I'm going to do those things that navigate me and lead me towards that, you know, move me towards that, as opposed to take me further away from it.
I guess that's like, again, the other thing I was going to say is like a lot of the time people don't realize to make that time for that self-reflection to realize our values and, you know, what actually does spark you. Because a lot of the time it's like, I guess we keep going for that pleasure thing instead of sitting back and actually realizing, you know, what actually does spark us, instead of going for what feels good to get rid of that so-called bad feeling.
Well, it's the external, right? It's looking, you know, the external pleasure. So the momentary fleeting pleasure in the piece of chocolate or the glass of wine, or, you know, the one night stand, as opposed to coming back and going, okay, so how do I create that pleasure within myself? Like, what are the things? So for me, it's very much, you know, movement and dancing, just touching really gently, just touching and being present with myself, meditation. Like, these things are pleasurable for me. They create pleasure, eating delicious fruit and really tasting it, you know. And there's such an internal thing for me. Like, yes, there are external things coming into me, but it's from a place within, you know. It's from a really a wholeness within, of knowing who I am and what feels good, as opposed to, okay, I'm not feeling great, so I'm just going to go and look for something outside of myself to make me feel better.
Yeah, which makes completely sense, because it's like when you do eat that piece of chocolate, it feels great in the moment, but then that, you know, 10 minutes after, you're feeling like crap again. And then say when you have
If it's
that
the
piece,
block, yeah.
yeah,
Done
100%.
many binges and purges on the older junk lollies and chocolate, like
Yeah.
shoveling it in, because I would deprive myself. So I'd like shovel it in, and then I'd be like, oh my God, and I'd go and spew it up. And then there's that whole other like mental bashing game that goes along with that too. It's like, oh yeah, it's intense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we've all been there. We all
Yeah.
do it. And you do notice, yeah, as you're saying, we do notice a difference. So I'll wrap it up on this question. What is the legacy you want to create?
A world full of women who have unleashed their hearts, are standing in their power and owning their worth. Oh yeah, and I just got goosebumps. So yeah, fuck
I
yeah.
actually did too. I felt so much like that. Is so powerful. Yeah, I 100% agree with
yeah.
that. That'd be
The women living, you know, living from their heart, because I know that when we women live from our heart, we create so much permission, especially for our men, to really kind of step in and live from their hearts too, and to feel safe and accepted and loved. And it's so powerful when the goddess can really come home to herself and open her heart. Ripple effects are profound. So
yeah, it helps society as a whole.
yeah,
It's a
100%.
thank you so much for coming on today. Very appreciate it.
Amazing. Thanks for having me. It's
That's so
been
good.
fun.
All right, cheers for tuning in today's podcast, guys. I just want to put a quick thing out there. I am currently doing a online one-on-one course for your mental well-being, so you can check that out at mitchellcrocker.com/courses, and all the rest of the information there. If you have any questions, make sure you reach out to me on any of my socials or email, which is on the website too. And also to tell me what you thought of the podcast, give us a like, you know, so forth. And if you think this podcast will add some value to a friend, share it with them. But thank you for tuning in today, guys. Very much appreciated.